Have you ever had a loved one leave the church and your relationship becomes awkward? This is so common and so sad. I got the chance to interview the Packard family who have been down this road. Cindy and Blair Packard are Orthodox believing parents, and Josh, their son, and his wife have left the church. We came together to discuss their journey, and it was amazing what they taught. They talked about the communications they regretted and how other siblings responded in positive and negative ways. They learned how to pick up the pieces again, express love, carry on, and build a beautiful relationship. This has become a favorite in the Questioning Saints virtual library. You can actually gain access to this interview at leadingsaints.org/14. This will give you 14 days to watch the Packard's interview and many others related to helping individuals who begin to question their faith. Go to leadingsaints.org/14 and get access now. Hey, welcome to the Leading Saints podcast. Now, for many of you that are brand new to Leading Saints, it's important that you know that Leading Saints is a nonprofit organization, 501c3, dedicated to helping Latter-day Saints be better prepared to lead. And we do that through content creation. We get so much positive feedback on the podcast, our virtual conferences, the articles on our website. You definitely got to check it out at leadingsaints.org. And on their homepage at leadingsaints.org, you can actually find the top 6 most downloaded episodes to the podcast. So if you're new, like the content, want to jump into some of our most popular episodes, head there after you listen to this episode. The following episode is a throwback episode, one that was published previously and was extremely popular. To see the details of when this was originally published, see the show notes. Enjoy this throwback episode. This episode is on more of a personal note. We talk with one of my counselors when I was bishop, who's now no longer a member of the church. And so I encourage you to buckle up, listen closely, and I won't regurgitate the introduction that we do during the episode, but it's definitely a different type of episode that I generally do, but I feel like it articulates a crucial part of leadership, and that is relationships between leaders and those that doubt in the church and how we can help them stay. So here's my interview with Heath Becker. This is Heath Becker. How are you, Heath?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Kurt.
Yeah, well, Heath and I go, I don't know if I'd say way back, but in the world of the Lee Ward, we go back. I consider Heath a great friend, and he was my last second counselor when I served as bishop. He was one of my counselors when I was released. And this episode, I'm sort of just wrestling with where to start with it a little bit, but I would say, man, I mean, we'll just stick with the facts. So yeah. Heath was my second counselor, and you are no longer a member of the church.
Yeah, that's right.
And it isn't because you were excommunicated.
I know.
But it was, you can tell I'm just nervous laughing here. You had your name removed from the records of the church.
Yeah, right? in June of this year.
2016.
2016. My wife and I and our 3 kids, we resigned from the church.
And we're going to get into that a little bit. And I first want to make some clarifications up front is, one, this wasn't necessarily my idea, though I maybe provoked it a little bit. You know, I'm not, I didn't go to your house and say, hey, you want to talk about, let's have an interview about your experience leaving the church and these things. But obviously there's a friendship there. And so it's not like because your relationship with the church ended that our relationship ended. And we weren't just friends on a bishopric level. I mean, our families have gone to Disneyland before with other
other families that we served with in our ward, and we live practically next door to each other. We see each other. Our kids are similar ages, so it's definitely not just hey, we are in the same calling and you seem like a nice guy. I mean, it definitely goes deeper than that. It wasn't my request, but we've been talking, and you've been helping us establish this, file all of our nonprofit 501c3 paperwork, right?
Yeah, I'm an attorney, and I started a nonprofit this year, and so I'm kind of helping you with this nonprofit paperwork.
Yeah, and you've been a lifesaver. I had another attorney that was helping me. He got busy, no fault to him. He was helping me as much as he could, and I was in need of knowing what to do to just get this filed so that we could be recognized as a nonprofit. And I know that you've recently set up your law firm as a nonprofit, immigration law firm, and so you were more than happy to show me through this or walk me through this and help me figure out how to do it. And so I can't thank you enough for doing that. But during that process, we've gone to lunch a lot together and just talked some things through about your experience. And so, and I think you listened to various podcasts, and we were talking about your experience. And I think at one point you said, hey, you can interview me, sort of jokingly. And I said, hey man, I would totally love that, because the conversations we have are so insightful, especially for me. I think you've benefited from them, and just, as two friends talking. So.
Yeah, and I thought this might be a good idea too, because, we left the church about 3 months ago. We stopped going to church, a few months before that. And it's just, we've been completely open about it with like family and friends and stuff. And, we haven't tried to hide anything. And it's just, but nobody wants to talk to us about it,
Yeah.
So,
it's like the big elephant in the room, and it's like, hey, let's talk about anything but that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess, maybe we had the expectation that maybe some people would maybe ask us about it, or want to know why, or, what's going on, or, but really it's okay, you resigned. Okay. And it's just, there's been a few very short conversations about it, but that, nothing so I thought maybe this might be a good way, to talk about it. And then maybe a way for people that know me and my wife and our kids, they could hear the story without having to, it's an awkward conversation and it's something difficult to talk
and
about.
I'm the lucky one that gets to have it. This is great, Heath.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. And another thing another point I want to make before we really dig into this is this isn't meant to be like a recorded counseling session. I'm not trying to counsel you. You're not necessarily trying to counsel me. We're not trying to fix anything.
Yeah.
We're not hoping by the end of this that we change one another's minds. And I think the one unique thing about this is that you're not, at least I haven't felt a whole that much, if any, of bitterness from you as far as towards the church. You're not like some people will leave the church and be like, all right, let's go burn it down type thing. What they're doing is horrible. And I've never felt that, and I think that goes into, and we'll get into the story of that. But so one, this isn't something I'm just chasing people down who have resigned from the church and trying to interview them. One, we're friends. Two, I've gained so much from our conversations. I've learned so much about myself as a leader. So if anything, this is not necessarily an analysis of you and your situation, but analysis of my situation as a leader. Obviously, Leading LDS being a leadership podcast, I hope that individuals that listen to this are obviously mainly leaders, and that they walk away from this thinking, I wonder if there's somebody like Heath in my ward, and how can I reach out to them and help them? And the thing is, as I think about this, is I don't necessarily feel like I'm a horrible leader. And again, it's not my fault. It's not that I should have done this and, you would have never left, or I should have done that and I could have, sent you in a different direction. But nonetheless, I learned things as far as how I perceive individuals in my ward, what they're struggling with and so forth. But so let's just go back and maybe build some context around your story, because you have sort of a unique story as it is. You weren't raised in the traditional Mormon family. Maybe you give us in 5 minutes kind of that background of your upbringing.
Yeah. I mean, my family are LDS, going back a long ways. Well, at least, on my mom's side, but I was raised kind of half time with my mom, half time with my grandparents. I spent 8 years with my grandparents. And they were LDS. And
this was in Missouri, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Missouri. My mom, pretty much the entire time I was growing up, I think she was, she didn't go to church. She started going to church when I was on my mission. But my grandparents were pretty active. And me personally, I started going to church, consistently on a regular basis when I was a junior in high school. I was living with my grandparents, and I started dating a LDS girl, and I started going to church, and then I started going to early morning seminary and hanging out with the missionaries a lot. And, it was a great support network and great friends. And, then it made me want to serve a mission, and I served a mission after high school, and I went to Ecuador.
And obviously learned Spanish, and that Spanish has blessed you in your career as an immigration attorney. You use it every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, exactly. So, Mormonism has definitely, shaped my life and who I am and my family. And I went to undergrad at BYU-Idaho, and I went to law school at BYU Law School.
As you were serving as my counselor, near the end of being released, we had some conversations that sort of brought this to the surface that you had been, you'd been struggling for a while as far as, the testimony goes. And I'm going to use all the cliches that maybe don't, I don't mean to put you in a certain box or whatever, but, there are some concerns with the history of the church. Would you say that categorizes it well, broadly enough? And that started in law school, right?
Well, really it started when I was an undergrad, about like 10 years ago, I think, like around 2006. My father-in-law gave me the book Rough Stone Rolling. And, I read probably more than half of it, and I just like closed it, and I had to like not look at it anymore because it was just bringing up so many things that it wasn't the narrative, that I knew about church history. But then, I kind of, they say the shelf. So I kind of just put it on the shelf. But then in law school, I took a class. Since I went to BYU Law School, there was a class on Joseph Smith and the law, and kind of like his legal battles with like the Kirtland Safety Society and some things touching on like polygamy and some other things. So I took a whole class on Joseph Smith and, lawsuits, trials, it all kind of related back to the law. But yeah, there was some things that like were discussed in that class that I just had never heard before. And to me were shocking. And so those were other things that I kind of, put on the shelf and tried not to think about.
Yeah. And those listening that may not be familiar with Rough Stone Rolling, it is a biography about Joseph Smith written by Richard Bushman, who's probably the scholar on Joseph Smith. And he's a patriarch. This isn't like some outlier third party book that's written by somebody bitter towards the church. This is a historic book that is very historic. And so you do go into some of those details of Joseph Smith that, weren't taught in primary or young women's.
Yeah. And, and it's written by like an active, faithful, believing member of the church. So it's not like anti-Mormon literature.
Yeah. And so it's not that you got, engulfed in this literature that just wasn't seeing things right, or they were twisting the truth. It's a strong historic book that, that I would have no hesitation recommending to individuals. And I think I'm sure a lot of listeners have read it and found it, there's a faith promoting as, helping you reanalyze your faith as well, as far as how you built your faith and your testimony. Yeah.
Other people that have read it have told me like, oh, that strengthened their testimony, but for me, it didn't,
And would you say that was sort of the beginning of sort of these questions and reanalyzing your testimony?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I read that book, I don't think I'd ever doubted ever, about Joseph Smith or the church or, the church leaders.
Yeah. So you go through that class and then you graduate law school.
December 2011. Yeah.
Okay, this in 2011. At this point, you were married before law school, right?
Yeah. I got married in 2004.
Okay. And so you graduate law school, then you go off and start your career in law. And after that point, I mean, it's not like you put it on the shelf at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not, it never crossed my mind, like stop going to church or anything. It was kind of one of those things where it's like, well, I guess we'll find out, after this life, what those answers are.
So from there, it's on the shelf. And then when did that shelf start to break down? When was the next time you really had to reanalyze and take a hard look at things again?
So, after law school, I got a job in Salt Lake City, at a nonprofit, as an immigration attorney. And I moved into the Lee Ward. And, I was after, I don't know, like maybe a year or so or whatever, I was called as the Elders Quorum president.
Yeah.
I guess that was, was a leadership calling. you know, like,
and that was really your first official leadership calling, right?
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, like I'd taught in like Sunday school or like priesthood lessons and stuff before, but, now like a leader, you know? And so I felt like, yeah, I just felt like, you know, like a leader needs to have a strong testimony, like they can't have doubts. And so like really it became my goal to like kind of extinguish all doubts, and just like have like I don't know how to describe it, just like a unbreakable testimony kind of thing, you know, like strengthen my testimony, like get rid of any lingering doubts or anything that I had in my mind. And so that was my mission, you know.
So it seems like is that call, and I remember when you know I submitted your name to the stake presidency to be the Elders Quorum president. So that for you, you sort of had to go back to that shelf, and you had to say, if I'm going to be a leader in this church, I'm going to have to get rid of the shelf, right?
Yeah.
Whether that was right or wrong, and as we go through this, again, this isn't we're just telling the story. Whether I'm right or wrong, whether you're right or wrong, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This is your story.
And I would say like, you know, I like even today, like, I mean, I don't claim to know any of the answers. You know, like I still don't know what the answers are.
Yeah. And this is what the part, and we'll maybe get to it, that was, as we talked after you resigned from the church, that really surprised me is it wasn't that you had now arrived to a determination. You now have the answers, and it's not in the church, it's out of the church.
I don't know if we're like jumping too far ahead here, but really like, the decision to resign was because, it just, I don't know, like maybe we need to talk more about the backstory, but like, you know, like, so I was Elders Quorum president, really trying to just like figure out, you know, grow my testimony. So every prayer, every day became, you know, part of it is like, help me, to not doubt, and help me to strengthen my testimony and to know without a doubt that the church is true. And it, you know, I never crossed my mind that the church wasn't true. It's just, I knew that I didn't have like this super, you know, like unwavering, no, without a shadow of a doubt testimony that I wanted to have, but I never thought like it wasn't true. Yeah.
Because in your mind, being a leader in the church, leaders in the church don't have that shelf.
Yeah.
And if they do, it's empty.
Yeah.
Right. And so now I'm a leader in the church, and so I need to get rid of this shelf in order to be an effective leader.
Yeah.
Right?
And really, I mean, like when I got called into the bishopric as the second counselor, it was basically the same thing, but just intensified, you know, because like you gotta, you know, every, you know, on a regular basis, kind of like direct, sacrament meeting. You have to like bear your testimony in sacrament meeting.
During fast and testimony meeting, right?
Exactly. When you're conducting those meetings. And then like more than that, just like when you go to Sunday school or like, you know, you're attending like, you know, the priesthood meeting or something, like people will look to you, you know, like when there's like questions in the class, like, oh, well, what do you think, Brother Becker? You know, you're a member of the bishopric. Like you're supposed to know the answers. You're supposed to like, you know, like be a spiritual leader and have like real insightful things to say. And, I got to the point when I was in the bishop, and I wasn't in the bishopric for more than a year. I think like total, it was maybe,
I think it was about a year.
About a year. Okay. Yeah. But like, it just got increasingly where like, I didn't think the church wasn't true, but like, I got to the point where I couldn't say that I knew that Joseph Smith was a prophet. And I, you know,
and that in your mind, that just didn't line up with how a leader is supposed to lead in the church.
Exactly. So like when I would like bear my testimony and it would only be Christ, I thought like, oh man, people are going to be like, you know, it was just like these unfounded fears. I think, you know, like people were going to think like, well, how, you know,
yeah,
that's a weak testimony, but like, it was just, you know, just cause, but I don't know. I just couldn't say, you know, like that I believe Joseph Smith was a prophet.
Yeah. And this is such an interesting concept of church culture that comes up because, you know, we're coming upon a general conference and, you know, we're going to hear some incredible talks, some incredible testimonies. And man, you look at somebody like Elder Holland, you know, President Uchtdorf, and you just know, you know that they know. You know, they're not once have I felt like, oh, come on, like you're kind of going overboard there. Or, you know, they always seem sincere.
Yeah.
And we idolize these individuals.
Yeah.
Which we should. They're incredible leaders, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not idolize in the wrong fashion, but you know what I mean. And we want to be that leader that can stand and testify.
Yeah.
But sometimes if we create a culture that only effective leaders are the ones with the testimony that can do that, I think we're sort of hurting ourselves. We're making it we're making the tent even smaller.
Yeah. And I don't think like you were creating that culture, but like,
right.
As you're mentioning that, like I'm having this flashback to one of our bishopric meetings. And like you had played a clip, and it was a great clip, like, but it was Elder Holland giving a talk about, testimony and how like we shouldn't have like a weak, testimony, but it should be a testimony where people could like kind of like warm their hands by the fire of our testimony. I wanted that. Like I thought like I needed to have that. Like if I'm going to be a leader, like I need to have that testimony that Elder Holland was talking about. And I've told you this, but I fasted, on a regular basis to increase my testimony, to know that Joseph Smith was a prophet. I went to the temple. I prayed in the temple. I read my scriptures. It became my quest, to know. And part of that too was like the Book of Mormon, because they go hand in hand, because if the Book of Mormon's true, Joseph Smith must have been a prophet.
Yeah.
And so it was just a lot of prayer, to find out that was, true.
And just to create some context for those that are listening, I want individuals to know that as I saw you serve, I mean, Heath is an incredible individual when it comes to just purely serving. And he's looking very uncomfortable right now as I say this, but the reality is like, I don't think you ever really enjoyed the administrative side of these callings, like, okay, go collect the home teaching numbers, or we got to meet. But when it came to like visiting, like I think of, Lance in the ward, and I would see you invite him over for dinner and things like that. Like, I just always idolized that. And I always thought, I want to be that type of saint that does that. And so and the reason I say that is one misconception that many individuals, and I think it only takes about a few months in leadership when you can get rid of this misconception, but it's individuals that have doubts. It's not about because they're sinning or they're doing something wrong, or they just really want to sin. And so these doubts are just sort of a smoke screen to that. I mean, and this what breaks my heart is that, you were striving to be better. You were fasting, you were going to the temple, and you were just craving that certainty. But for whatever reason, it didn't come in the way that you expected it to, or if it came at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, I look back on it and like, I mean, like, I don't know, like maybe God was trying to give me an answer and I just couldn't hear it, or I wouldn't hear it. I don't know. That's the thing. Like, I just don't know, Yeah.
Yeah. So, and as we've had these conversations in your office and such, at one point you said that, you don't think you would have left if you weren't put in the bishopric. And I'm like, great, Heath, thanks for blaming it on me, But but what you mean by that is it just turned up the dial on that pressure to be that leader who could stand and say, I know.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
During that time we served together, before you even let me know you were struggling with something, you seemed like there was a struggle going on.
Yeah.
And you're not, you aren't the type that necessarily is just going to open up and let these things pour out. And I think a lot of people are like that. But looking back, with hindsight, it's more obvious that this was going on, that you were struggling with this.
Yeah.
So, and let's just kind of finish up the timeline here, and we'll come back. And it came, basically, I was called to the stake presidency, so a release was coming. We called the first counselor as the new bishop.
Yeah.
And I remember that, and this, would you say, near the end there, this was sort of the pinnacle of what you were going through, right?
Yeah. Well, and like right before, So, because I mean, the bishopric got dissolved, like you said, because you got called into the stake presidency, but probably just like a few weeks before that, things just, I don't know. Do you want me to talk about it? I mean,
let's do it. I mean, if you're comfortable with it.
Yeah. I mean, like, it was such a struggle with me. Like, I wanted so bad just to like, like that burning in the bosom, or, however you want to describe it. Like, I just wanted so bad, like that, just like undeniable answer when you pray to know, about the Book of Mormon or Joseph Smith. And I couldn't get it, or I couldn't recognize it, or whatever the answer is. But I became like increasingly like just depressed, and just incredibly just, I don't know, just, depressed is the word for it.
How did that manifest itself? I mean, were you take days off work? Would you sleep in? What? So,
like I just, it was like, I was consumed by this, like, is this true or is this not true? I was consumed with like getting the answer, and I couldn't get the answer. And is the problem me? Am I just not like good enough, or like, I don't know, but, it just, I was, it was hard. And the thing is, it's like, so that it was a Sunday, and this was just a few weeks, before they changed the bishopric, but, it was a Sunday. I had taken like a late nap, and I woke up from my nap, and like for the first time, like in my life, it's just like, I had thought like, it's not true, and, it was just like, you'd have to understand like where I was at, and like the depression I was feeling, and like struggling so hard to get an answer. Like, I felt relieved. Like, I felt like this like incredible relief, because like, well, if it's not true, then that kind of answers it, like that's why there's all these things that don't make sense, and that, and I remember like I woke up from the nap, and I just had that thought, and I remember telling my wife, like, I think the answer might be that it's not true. But then like, it's like that, like I felt relief for a little bit. Right. But it's like, after, it wasn't long, but like the relief kind of like replaced itself with like thoughts that like, well, shoot, like if the church isn't true, like what's the point? And like, I think I told you like I would have like, I felt relieved to have an answer, but then I thought like, well, if it's not true, there's no point. And so like that last the Sunday where they changed the bishopric, I just couldn't bring myself to go to church. Yeah. And it's like Rachel and I, my wife, we tried to come up with like something to do that day, like an excuse to be out of town, but we just like, we stayed at home, and I just like stayed in bed, and we didn't go to church to be released. But it's just because I couldn't bring myself to stand, in front of the Lord, and like, I don't know.
Yeah. And going on from my perspective, I was there, and I remember sitting in that Sacrament meeting like, now where's Heath?
Yeah, I didn't tell anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. And I knew, and at this point we'd had some of these conversations. I knew you were sort of going through this process, but I was just like, man, like, he's my friend. Like, I want him here. Like, we've sort of been in the ditches together. We've been in this bishopric, and it's ending, and it's kind of a reflective meeting, as they generally are, as those changes are happening. But now knowing what I know, because we would have had you stand with your wife and share your testimony, right?
Yeah.
And so I can understand going through that, why you wouldn't want to be there. So let's just pause for a minute here, and again, man, this is a tough episode, because it's a little personal for me, I guess. Yeah. But nonetheless, I've been so blessed from our interactions that I've got to share this. And so I don't want this to seem like, okay, I've brought this guy on the podcast, and he has received this answer that the church isn't true.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to make it sound that way either.
Right. And I want to just make sure people listening that's just what your experience, what you were going through. You were in such a race to get that confirmation, to gain that certitude that when the thought, who I would claim where the thought would come from may be different where you would claim the thought would come from. When that thought came across your mind of, well, maybe it just isn't true, and suddenly that stress lifts.
Yeah.
Nobody can blame you for entertaining that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you were depressed. You had been fasting. You'd been going to temple. You've been begging for this answer.
Yeah.
Right? And way back in primary, we've had those lessons of, okay, you just, you read Moroni, then you pray and the answer come. And absolutely, that has been, that's a very simplified experience of what my experience has been. I have received that witness.
Yeah.
And I'm giving my life to this church through my service. I mean, the time, the things I've given, I really feel like I've received that, but my heart just breaks that when you're going through that, I wish, again, this isn't about what I could have done or couldn't have done, but I wish I could have done something,
Yeah.
And I don't know if we'll discover through this interaction what that thing is, but again, this is this comes to the purpose of this interview. As leaders are listening, they need to stop and just ask themselves, do I have any Heaths in my ward? And what are you going to do about it? Right now, we had, and going back to when we were still serving, we had these interactions where he just said, I'm struggling with this.
Yeah.
And we had some good discussions and I validated what you're saying. I didn't say, oh, Heath, come on. Forget about it. I really tried to validate it. And to be honest, I walked away from those interactions feeling like, Heath's okay.
Yeah.
He's struggling and that's cool. But I wasn't worried about you. I thought you were sort of coming out of it.
Yeah. And just to say something on what you said, I've never claimed that that thought that the church wasn't true. I've never claimed that was revelation.
Yeah.
But the thought was there. It's the first time I'd ever thought it. And I did feel relief, but I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where I go back to, nobody can blame you if in that moment that you entertained that idea and the stress went away.
Yeah.
To me, I look back and that was, how can I raise my kid to believe in these principles and understand the process of getting a testimony and without building that stress as they go through that process, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And as we interact with members, how can we interact with these members and encourage them towards testimony without building that stress?
Yeah. And as about cause me and you had, like you mentioned, we had talked, I told you, that I was struggling, with doubts and with my testimony. And I remember you had made the comment, not that you were going to release me, but that maybe you should release me from the bishopric. Mm-hmm. And this was before, we knew you were going to get called into the stake presidency. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know, I don't know that it's hard to know what I was thinking back then, but I mean, I was probably trying to act maybe things were more better than they actually were. I didn't want to be released. I didn't think I needed to be released. And
I don't think and just to clarify, I wasn't necessarily saying, well, maybe we should release you because, we can't have somebody with doubts in the bishopric.
Yeah.
But more, I was just listen, you were starting your law practice at this time. You had a lot coming at you. You were sleeping in your office some nights.
Yeah, that's right.
You were just very stressed there. So I kind of approached that Heath, listen, if we need to release you, I'm not going to, it's not because you failed or I'm not going to be as disappointed in that. So
no, and you're absolutely right. And that's the way I remember it too. I mean, you were definitely, it was coming from a place of love and we're friends and I did, that's the way I took it too. But I honestly thought that I was just it was a struggle and there was I was going to come out the other end with, this perfect knowledge that it was all true. I really thought that.
Yeah. And you were in the struggle and the struggle is going to be worth it.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess.
Yeah. So let's kind of finish the story to bring us up to, because this was a year ago that the change happened.
Yeah.
And I remember, soon after we released, you met with the bishop and the new bishop and just said, listen, I'm out. Not out, but I'm just going to step away from being involved in the church.
At that point. So when they called the new bishopric, at that point, I had completely lost my testimony of Joseph Smith or, the Book of Mormon and stuff. So, I think my brother-in-law was getting married around that same time. and my temple recommend was expired. So, like I renewed my temple recommend, and I felt guilty for it because, I don't know. I think the question is like, do you have a testimony of, which is very vague. So I think I kind of justify like, well,
sure. All right.
Yeah. Like a testimony can go either way. Right.
Yeah. Cause you weren't,
I really wanted to like go to the wedding. Like I didn't want to like be excluded from my brother-in-law's wedding, and so I ended up
and that family knew nothing of what you were going through.
Exactly. Like I hadn't shared anything with them or anybody.
And not going to being,
yeah.
Like, oh, come on, man. You just let your temple recommend expire. Like get the temple recommend so you can come to my wedding. Right.
Exactly. I ended up not going to the wedding anyways. But it's because like, I had a client come to my office that had like a very urgent like case. And, I slept in my office for like 3 days, like, and worked around the clock to do that case. And I missed my brother-in-law's wedding anyways. But then like right after the wedding, I came into the new bishop's office and I gave him my temple recommend just because I felt like it would be dishonest for me to have it because I couldn't say I believed,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then what transpired because from there, I think your family wasn't really at church very regular after that. What transpired between that and then the resignation?
We stopped coming to church. I think we have a good mutual friend that was in the ward and it was like their last Sunday. And I think that was like the only time that we had gone to church in like the last, I don't know. I think that's the only time I've come to the Lee ward in like the last year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like really we stopped coming to church. I started listening to to a lot of podcasts, they deal with like Mormon LDS topics, I really was searching for something that like kind of talked about all these issues with church history. And like recognized that like maybe there were some problems there, and kind of validated it. I think that if I would have like found something like that, like early on, I don't know, it's hard to know like what I would have done, but I mean, I think I've come to like a place like where I'm at currently where like I feel like I could start going to church again. But like my testimony is just, I don't know that it'll be what it was before. I don't know. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but
sure. Actually that the bishop that replaced me, he was only in for 6 months and had to move and because of family situations and then a new bishop was called and I remember coming to church one Sunday and the bishop mentioning to me that they had gotten the resignation letters from your family, and I was like blown away, like, oh, like, and to be honest, it completely broke my heart.
Yeah,
because I served with you so long, I knew your family, and it's like, well, it's fine that they separate, but I don't, I hope they don't feel like they have to resign, like, and so and it almost made me thought, man, maybe they're more bitter than I thought,
Yeah,
and you've mentioned that you just found that letter that's online and it says all the right legal things and sent it in. And that letter sounds pretty bitter. Like if anybody read it, like, man, what's this guy's problem?
Yeah. I mean, I told you like there's a website I kind of told you like, it's almost as easy as buying something on Amazon where, oops, I didn't mean to take it that far. But the thing is like the decision. So like to resign, like it's just, there's a website. It's just like, you don't have to write up anything. I mean, it's just,
you hit print and then fill your names in.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just putting your name on a form letter that gets sent to the church from this website. So, I mean, it only takes a couple minutes and then it's done. Right. And so, and it was kind of, I guess, like a rash decision, but, I just, the thing is like with me, it's like I've always kind of been like all or nothing, like no half efforts. And I wasn't going to church and I didn't want to be, like a Jack Mormon or, if I was going to have a religion, I didn't want to like half live it, and plus like I had this thought, like, well, this doesn't mean this is like forever. It just means that, this is where I'm at right now, like, as far as resigning. Cause, and plus like, I don't want to pretend to be somebody that I'm not. And I get asked like at work, like if I'm LDS, we live in Salt Lake, it's Utah. So it's a common question, are you LDS? So for those months, like that we weren't going to church and like that I, stopped believing in Joe Smith and the Book of Mormon, like it was so hard to answer that question. Cause I felt like if I said yes, I was being like not honest, but like what other answer was there? And so I don't know. part of me thought it would just make it be easier because then I could just truthfully tell people like, no, I'm not LDS, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But like, honestly, like it hasn't gotten any easier. Like it's still, it's still like, you know, probably even just more awkward.
Yeah.
And I don't know, probably like maybe once a week, like I just like, man, like maybe a little bit regret resigning and think like it was, I don't know, you know, like, was that the right thing to do?
Yeah. So how would you describe where are you at right now with it all? I mean, emotionally, with your perspective on it all.
So, I mean, here's the good part. Like, I feel like I'm happier than I've been in like a really long time. And it's not just like, you know, and it's not just like the ups and downs and I'm just on an up, you know, like I really feel like overall, you know, like I just feel like more at peace. And I just feel like I don't have this inner turmoil inside of me, like killing me, like that I have to find out like that it's all true, you know, cause I guess I've just kind of like let that go. Mm-hmm. And I told you that like, so the thing is, when I was going through all this, like, you know, I did what I thought I was supposed to. Like I stayed away from anything that like websites or podcasts or anything that would be like considered like against the church, you know. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until like after we stopped going, you know, and like a few months later that like maybe that I started listening to some of that stuff. But honestly, like I feel like some of that stuff has kind of like helped me because I didn't know that there was like people like me that doubted. And honestly, people at church don't talk about that they have doubts. So like, I just thought that maybe everybody like had these, you know, strong testimonies or like, I don't know, like I didn't know like anyone that was in my position. And so I think that, you know, now that I've kind of like found some of these podcasts and like listened to some people and I've listened to some things where like, where people have issues about church history, yet they still find like they still believe in the church or like come to church, you know, and they still serve in the church and stuff. And honestly, like, I feel like, I feel like I could find my place in the, you know, in the church that way, where it's like, there's so many good things about the church, but for some reason, like in my mind, at least, like it all kind of came down to Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I'm at a place in my life now where it's like, I could just say like, you know, I don't care about church history anymore. It's just like, it is what it is. Yeah. But like, there's still like good things about church. And I think like I could come to church and I think I could like, you know, like I'm at a point in my life, I guess, where I could just kind of let that stuff go. Yeah. But I wasn't before, you know?
And when you say that, I'm thinking, and when you said it initially in our conversations off the recording here, as a leader and as a bishop, I asked myself, how can I have people that are struggling with this? How can I get them to that point before the resignation? Because I don't think, and I mean, you'd agree that the resignation didn't help you get there. It was just sort of part of that timeline.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
It wasn't like, oh, I needed to resign so I could step back and look, but you said it was done sort of hastily. Yeah. And then you decompressed a little bit and were able to look back and think, you know what? You know, and you discovered others like you. Yeah. And thought, wow, you know, other people are doing it. Other people, I'm not the only person in the world that have this concern. Yeah. And so what would you say to a bishop? Like if we could turn back time a little bit, like, is there anything that could have been done to help you have that decompression?
I don't know. Cause like I was in a bad spot. Like I was in like the darkest point of my life. I mean, it was, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, like,
yeah. And these are the things I love to ponder over and think about, because this is such a crucial turning point. Yeah. Because though you're not a member on paper, you're being the truest to yourself than many members are, right? I think a lot of people get caught up in the culture of the church and they think, well, everybody goes to church, but you know, in their private lives, they're not reading the scriptures. They're not, you know, really focused there, but it fits into their day-to-day culture, right? And I don't mean to make a general statement about the membership of the church, but you recognized what you believed and where you're at, and you took a decision, and now maybe some of those decisions were more hastily.
Yeah. You know, and I'm just thinking about, you know, like a question, like maybe it would have been a good thing to be released from the bishopric. but then again, I mean, like there's such a stigma with that. I mean, it's like, oh, like what did he do? You know, but that's the thing. Like when I was, I don't know that there was anything that could have taken that pressure off.
Yeah.
Once it built up, you know, but I don't know. It's hard to, you know, cause honestly, like stepping away, for, you know, a few months, like I feel just better, you know, like, and I'm not.
And stepping away, you don't mean resigning. I don't want people to think like, you know, resigning helped because it helped me step away, but it's been a way that's forced you to step away.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, cause you know, like when you're struggling with doubts and you're in the bishopric, I mean, I don't know what other wards are like, but in the Lee ward, I mean, like you're getting called multiple times a week during the week to give blessings. To
give rides.
To give rides. Like there's just a lot of needs, and
we're in the inner city. There's a lot going on.
Yeah. And so like you're giving blessings, or you're like, you're going over to people's homes that are really struggling. And like, you're like, man, I'm struggling too, you know, but you're trying to like build them up and like help people. And it was just, that was difficult for me. Cause I was, you know, like I didn't want to be inauthentic. I didn't want to like pretend. It was important to me to not pretend that like I was a strong believer if I wasn't. So, you know, there's
this book. I haven't read it. It's above my pay grade, called Anti-Fragile. And it's this concept of being anti-fragile. You know, you have to tear your muscle in order to build muscle. Right.
Yeah.
And it all goes back to this balance where I feel like sometimes we try and be so strong. We try to be so convinced of the gospel that we kind of go down the path you do. I'm going to fast more. I'm going to pray more. I'm going to go to the temple more. And in reality, pushing that way rather than stepping back, actually, man. And I'm not trying to sound controversial.
Yeah.
I'm saying like, well, maybe you should just go out and tell people to stop coming to church, or whatever. But how can we get, as leaders, how can we get members that are in this state to just step back and take a break for a minute? And that doesn't mean like you ask them, okay, we need you to not come to church for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But if I was to go back again, this is more of analysis of me and my leadership style and how I approach it, because hopefully leaders listening can analyze this. But how can we approach these members that are going through this doubt and just saying, I just want you to stop praying about it for a minute. Give certitude a rest.
Yeah.
And just come to church. Like do nothing else, but just come to church, sit in the back, and just take it in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't try to be 100% home teacher. Don't try to go. If you don't want to go to the second hour, don't go to the second hour. If you don't want to go to the third hour, don't go to the third hour.
Yeah.
Just come to church, take in what you can, go home, and just love your family.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, cause I mean, I was driving myself crazy, and I was making myself incredibly depressed. Just trying to, you know, like I have to get the answer and I need it now.
Yeah.
You know?
And you're pushing.
Yeah.
And then that thought came through your mind. Well, maybe it isn't true.
Yeah.
And that was suddenly the easier path.
Yeah.
And that was the answer that was the only answer coming at that point. So I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was not comfortable then at all with uncertainty.
Yeah.
But I really believed that, like,
man, that's such a powerful statement, Heath. Listen to that. I was not comfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I think if members cannot say that, there's a problem.
Yeah.
Because Heath, I promise you right now, I'm pretty certain I've had such remarkable experiences as a leader. And when I stand up in state conference and I bear my testimony, there's some statements of certitude there of hyperbole.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean everybody's experience has to be that, or everybody's path to certitude needs to be there, nor is the goal certitude.
Yeah.
And I feel so much that we blind ourselves by thinking, I need to be able to stand up in sacrament meeting and say, I know. And then I get a star on my forehead and I sit down and I say, I'm one of you.
Yeah.
Right. And so going back to that, what was it? What was the statement that
I wasn't comfortable with uncertainty?
We have to be comfortable with uncertainty. Yeah. We have to be that. As leaders, we have to be comfortable with a gospel doctrine teacher that stands up that is uncertain about things. We have to be comfortable with a a counselor in the bishopric that is uncertain about things.
I've told you, one of the podcasts I listen to is Secular Buddhism. And the guy that does the podcast was actually like a AP in my mission. In Ecuador. Is
he still a member of the church? Or?
He says he is. He put on a workshop here in Salt Lake, and I went to it like last December. It honestly, like it was amazing, and it brought so much peace to me. Like after the workshop, like I just for like a couple of days I couldn't talk about anything else, like with my wife. But one thing that I've learned from like the secular Buddhism is that like what's important is like the here and the now, like this life, like and because I think I don't know anything about Buddhism, but like I've listened to this podcast and I've tried to learn, and one of my clients is a Buddhist temple, and so I've spent hours and hours talking with my client, about Buddhism and stuff. And one of the things that I've taken away from Buddhism, and not that this is like their core teaching, but like to be okay, they're okay with uncertainty. Like they're not so worried about, like, at least from my point of view, like having all the answers. It's just like, you can't control what the truth is. You can't control what is after this life and what isn't after this life. You can't control any of it. So, like kind of like, and that's okay. And like, and like, all is like, this is what you have, and kind of cherish the present moment and don't get yourself so worked up about like what's coming next.
Yeah.
And that really helped me, just, yeah. Cause I think that, like, yeah, it's about, it's okay to not have all the answers.
Yeah. In the culture of the church, I feel like we sometimes almost brag about that certitude, right?
Yeah. Well, the one true church.
Right. And I'm not trying to make this controversial podcast. I am here to believe, I truly believe this is the one true church, but how do we define that? Yeah. And sometimes we define a way that means nobody else's church is true at all. Right. Yeah. And so it's these statements as leaders is similar to the article I wrote about your without a shadow of a doubt testimonies hurting your leadership. And this is what I'm talking about, is when we stand there and we talk with such conviction and certitude. Those without conviction and certitude think that they've done something wrong and they haven't arrived, right?
Yeah.
And so, but if we stand there and let the ward members know that we're okay with our own uncertainty, they'll be okay with their uncertainty, and then they'll come back, right? Yeah. And I would be foolish to say that I'm certain about every last principle of the gospel, every last part of history that's happened, because I'm not. I'm not a scholar. I'm not an intellectual. I can't talk myself out of any question. But nonetheless, something is calling me,
yeah,
to this church, to this gospel, to Joseph Smith and who he was, and. Yeah. But sometimes that posture of the one true church sometimes hurts other individuals trying to arrive there. I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, you are. And I've told you, like, I haven't forgotten about like the spiritual experiences I had, like in the church. Like my mission was amazing. Like it really was the best 2 years. Like and there's so many good memories of the church, and that I hold on to. Like you really do. Like you feel good going to church, like there's a good feeling there for sure. And like they're good people. Like I love, members of the church. And that's the thing. Like I miss it, like mm-hmm. the times, in the last few months where like I've really regretted like resigning is because like, somebody that I really respect, or, like a peer, has like invited me to dinner, and they're LDS, and like it's just that nobody knows I resigned, because it's not like I just don't talk about it, right. And I'm not trying to hide it, but like I've gone to dinner with people I really respect, and they're leaders in their wards and stakes and stuff, and I just like, man, like I regret, or I don't know, like I don't know. It's like, I'm not trying to hide the fact that I resigned, and I would totally openly tell them that I resigned if they asked me, like, oh, what's your calling now? Like I would not try to hide it at all, but like, I'm just kind of secretly hoping it doesn't come up, because I think like if they found out, like their opinion of me would change, and like I'd lose that relationship. And I miss those relationships, and like, I miss coming to church, and I miss being with people and having that connection.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I remember during one of our lunches, you said something that really, really stood out to me is, as you've sort of gotten to a better place and you've been struggling still with some of these historical facts that still bother you and things, but you've kind of discovered other people have put them aside and are still believing. And
Yeah.
And you said to me, what if it really is just about Christ?
Yeah.
And when you said that, kind of stopped you, and I said, Heath, it is just about Christ, and sure, I mean, the Lord has his pattern through prophets, and by saying that, it doesn't diminish Joseph Smith's role or Brigham Young's role, but it truly is about Christ.
Yeah.
And his grace, and that I'm no further along the path than you are.
Yeah.
Though on paper I have some ordinances, and those ordinances are helping me progress, but we're all in this together. We're all learning in our different paths, and I think right now some of these decisions you've made, they've been done in haste, but I think we can always go back to, like, Christ is still there, and his atonement still works for you.
Yeah.
You always have that option of coming back and returning to the church, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I honestly, like I told you, when we were out to lunch, like that, like I'd read this story of somebody that had resigned and came back, and it was like 2.5 year process or something. And I was just like, oh man, like I didn't know like that's what it was. And I don't.
You expect it to be shorter or longer, or what?
I thought like when I was ready to come back, I'd just come talk to you, or, like my bishop, like, all right,
let's do this.
Yeah.
Build the font.
They're like, okay, like, yeah, you're ready to go. Let's baptize you. But it's not like, I mean, I honestly, like all I did, I read one person's story,
right.
and I don't know if it's, really how it is or if it's changed or whatnot. But from what I understand, like it takes like a year. Yeah. You got to come to church for like a year and like keep all the commandments and everything. And then like, confessed all your sins while you resigned and everything. And then after a year, you can get rebaptized. And then after another year, you can get like your the temple blessings restored. Yeah. And I think it, what I read was it involves some letters to like, church headquarters and like the first presidency, of all your sins and stuff. And they make a determination whether you can come back. And that's pretty serious, like, I don't know. I didn't know that that's what it was.
Yeah. And when you said that to me, I'm so happy you're thinking about it. And again, not that you're, thinking about it every day or whatever, but
yeah,
it's an option, man. And like we talked about at our lunches that, and you're always welcome here, and
yeah.
I don't think anybody, especially our ward, it turns over every 6 months. So nobody really knows either of us anymore, but, man, I hope you do just come and gain and just be that person that sit there and absorb what comes and don't worry about the stress of the pressure.
Yeah.
Of being that perfect member, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. And it's already been mentioned, but like really like it sticks out in my mind. Like, there's a person that has a blog, and they said that, really they don't care about church history. Like they care about the good parts of the church. And like, I really feel like after hearing that, and of course I just recently heard that, I'm already resigned, but I was like, like I could do that now. I could be that Mormon, but then I think like, man, like a few years ago, like if I don't know, like, if I came back to church, I might be like the type of Mormon I would have hated a couple years ago, but I don't know.
But that's okay. Right? I mean, because that's the thing, like we've got to be okay with those Mormons. Like there's not a Mormon that nobody has fit box to come to church. Anybody's welcome here. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when people have like certain like attitudes or things like, like that problems with the church, people are like, well, go find another church. That was my attitude a couple of years ago, but I would have a different attitude now, like I think it's good to like invite people to have different perspectives, and that's okay, cause I don't know. I don't have any of the answers.
Okay. My last question's a tough one.
Yeah.
Will you just share with us like your testimony, like where it's at? You can say whatever you want, even if it's something I would disagree with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I still pray. I can't not pray, and I pray, like somebody's listening, even though now I'm not sure somebody is or not, and that's the thing. Like I hope there's a God, and I hope he loves us. I hope that families, are forever. I hope that there's something after this life. Like I really want there to be, but I just don't know anymore. But I've come to a point where I'm okay. Like I'm okay not knowing. Like I love my family. I love my job. You know, like I really care about being a good person. If, you know, and like raising my kids to like be good people and to just love others. And so, I don't know, it's pretty weak, but, I hope God exists. I hope, you know, Christ is there. I hope he's listening to my prayers. And I hope I can be like, you know, with my friends and family after this life. I really want that to be true.
That concludes my interview with Heath Becker. I hope many of you that have sat here and listened to this episode have thought of an individual in your ward, or maybe the counselors in your presidency, or maybe you've been inspired to reassess your perspective on individuals who you think have the strongest testimony of certitude. And just to conclude this episode, I just want to expound a little bit on what I've learned through my relationship with Heath. And as you can listen, I'm encouraged by how he talks about things. I'm encouraged that he's actually interested in the process of what it takes to become again a member of the Church of Jesus Christ. And I hope in the future there can be a second part to this episode talking about his return. And if he doesn't, you know, I'll still love Heath and his family always. And it's obvious that, you know, membership in the church is not what defines love for anybody. And I think most members of the church would feel the same way. But consider this quest for certitude that we encourage in the church. And it's a good quest. I feel like I've gone through my own version of that quest for certitude. And I've had remarkable experiences. I've had spiritual experiences. I've stood at the lecterns of the church and testified in my own way about things that I feel pretty certain about. Now, I've never seen an angel. I've never heard a voice from heaven tell me these things, but I have had experiences that in my own way testified to my heart that Joseph Smith was in fact a prophet, and that what he did and translated was the word of God. I'm aware of the sticky history, the messy facts, that for some make that more difficult to believe even when they've had a spiritual witness in some form, in some way, whether strong or weak. And I don't think anybody, any leader in the church, as they stand and testify boldly, are meaning to diminish others, when in fact those words of power sometimes build up others and testify to others. And for me personally, I've sort of just discovered through this relationship with Heath, this paradox that happens with a bold testimony. It can build some, but at the same time alienate others. And in no way am I calling that across the board we water down testimonies so that they don't alienate anybody. I think they definitely do more good than bad. And it's not about testimony per se, but it's about being aware of individuals who hear those testimonies and crave to own one themselves, that crave the certitude that people like myself experience. And I'd be foolish to say that I'm 100% certain, but boy, am I certainly convinced. So consider the individuals that are doubting in your ward or in your group. Consider the relationship you have with them. And when they're begging from their knees for a spiritual witness above all other witnesses that will convince their heart of the truthfulness of this gospel, and for some reason it hasn't come in the way that they've thought. Maybe it has come, but not in the way that they expected. And so they're not ready to accept maybe those messages, those spiritual witnesses that come. Or maybe it hasn't come yet for some reason. How can we help them just step back for a minute and give their quest for certitude a break? Because that very quest for certitude is what is leading them to uncertainty. This is the great paradox of leadership, is to encourage and challenge and push to become greater and become more and to accomplish things above our capacity, but at the same time, not diminishing them and discouraging them and giving them more and more examples of why they don't measure up. I don't have the answer to that. And I don't think this episode was meant to give that answer, but maybe spend some time pondering over how can we encourage individuals to try the quest for certainty without discouraging them and putting too much stress on them to get there today. I'd love your feedback. I'd love your thoughts and perspectives that you've had during this interview. I know I've been blessed by my relationship with Heath and his family and understanding what they're going through. And I hope now that you've heard his story, you've been blessed as well. And that concludes this throwback episode of the Leading Saints podcast. Now that we've reached the end of the episode, I quickly want to thank you for supporting the Leading Saints podcast. There's so much content out there to consider, and you picked this one. If Leading Saints has made an impact in your life, we would sure like to hear about it at leadingsaints.org/contact. And if you could quickly text or email this episode to a leader you know, I bet it will bless their life. You can mark off your good turn daily, and let's even call it ministering. Okay, maybe not that far. But seriously, thank you, and help us share this content. Remember, go to leadingsaints.org/14 to hear the Packard family's experience of when loved ones leave the church.
It came as a result of the position of leadership which was imposed upon us by the God of heaven, who brought forth a restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when the declaration was made concerning the only true and living church upon the face of the earth, we were immediately put in a position of loneliness, the loneliness of leadership, from which we cannot shrink nor run away, and to which we must face up with boldness and courage and ability.